talking about the divine and what's that like and how do we unpack that. And so the divine is this field of infinite potential, and it holds everything. And when it speaks to us in a way, it's like that. It sounds really cool. You know, we can kind of feel it's good, but what the heck was it saying? And I think that when we talk about Jesus, you know, get me Jesus on the line, Jesus is like the translator. And so when you experience Jesus, it's a way of understanding what that infinity is, because that's too big to really get it otherwise. It's not the only translation. You know, there's the whole switchboard there. You could say, get me Buddha on the line, get me my grandmother on the line, get that dog on the line. We were praying up before the service, and Zeke was in the middle, and I was watching, actually, Zeke, because he had already figured out that Cylvia is this tremendous dog person, and he's just looking at her, and she was wagging her tail with him, and they're in this communication going on, and he was so attentive to her. And I think that's what the divine does. It's just fixed on us, like in the meditation, saying, I just adore you. You are so beautiful, which is a different message than most of us get from ourselves and got as we were growing, right? But that's what the divine is trying to say. And so it sends messengers like dogs and Jesus and your grandmother and whoever it was for you to say, this is what I'm trying to tell you. It's all about love. So I invited Cylvia here to talk with me today because we were at the conference together for the Northwest region, and she was sharing some of her experiences as she's going through the process to become a Unity minister, and she's had some real shifts around God. So
yeah, I have. I have to say though, I don't think it is coincidental that dog spelled backwards is God.
Right.
That's all I'm saying. For me, that is God. So some of you know, but I was raised pretty heavy-handed fundamentalist Christian, and my biggest evolution in my spiritual growth has been moving beyond that sense of a separate, out there, and pretty terrifying God. And I'll give you just one story I shared earlier. I can remember still, I was probably 8 or 9. I'm in our little white steeple country church. It's got a row of red velvet pews on either side. It goes up to a big podium up here with like a 5 times life-size crucified Jesus, right? And Pastor DeWeber, I can't even believe I can remember his name, is on fire about something, you know, and his white hair is flying and spit's flying out of his mouth. And I'm sitting next to my mom, and he literally says at some point, he said, one of the benefits for those of us who are saved is that we will get to watch the unsaved gnash their teeth in hell for forever. And I looked up at my mom, and I was like, Mom, I don't think I want to go. I don't want to go. I was like, I didn't want that God to even notice me. And so if you had told me, even 6 months ago, I would be up here talking about Jesus, you would have been dreaming. But we have had to, part of Kevin and I are going through the ministry program, and they have 18 required prerequisites. 6, I think, total have to do with the Bible and Jesus and Christ and all of that. So it's been an odyssey, and the growing edge for me is being able to hold openness for communication with the concept of Jesus as a spiritual being. And I'll show you something. I had to bring this. How many of you have seen, it's a pretty well-known little devotional book called Jesus Calling? So 4 years ago...
Clearly not a big Jesus crowd here. Erica, you couldn't see it, but there were 3 hands raised.
4 years ago, my life hit a really rough patch, and it was really, really transformative, and I had nothing to do with Jesus at that point. But a couple who are very devout, gave me this little book, and the kindness, if nothing else, spoke to me at a time when I needed some kindness. So I opened it up, This book is called Jesus Calling. But even then, I had to put a label over Jesus. I put a label and wrote I am, because I could get around that concept of the I am. I think you might want to speak more to that. You did this morning.
Of the I am. Don't hold me to what I said this morning. I have no idea what I said this morning.
I know. Well, okay, I'll go on a little bit. I don't want to take all the time. So I think for me, for sure, and I think for most of us, our concept of God evolves as our concept of ourselves evolve. And I had a very powerful experience of that right about the same time that life blew up when I was given that little book. And I reached a place where I was so broken that I had my identity crack. And it felt like mass destruction. But in a moment of that, for the first time, I think what I say now is I met my spiritual self. I lost the sense of boundary, even of my physical body, and I directly experienced a connection with Source, with something expansive and way beyond me. And the concept I am was not in my frame or my language at that time, but that is exactly what I said of it. I met the I am. And it changed my life. And from that moment forward, my concept of God has very much been shifting into, I'll just put it right out there, I am God. It's the I am conscious. Yeah, woo! Mm-hmm. That's the growing edge, and I think that that's one of the really beautiful things that unity brings, is the concept that we ourselves are extensions of this God energy. And that's how it's personal for me. I am now at least open to this Jesus thing because it keeps knocking on my door left and right. So I'm staying open and willing. But I have been personally healed by the notion of Jesus as a way shower instead of a way that it's either that way or the highway. Right.
I think that when we think about the divine, because it's so big and it contains all that is, that's an awesome way to think of it. I really love that whole quantum field idea that it just extends everywhere. There's no edge to it. Anything that we could desire is there already, now. But if it's out there and it's not here, it's not helping. And so what I love about the unity way of thinking about it is it's like the sun and the rays of the sun. The rays of the sun are what touch us, right? If we're lying out sunbathing, or, yesterday I was waiting for Jeff and I walked down the sidewalk and found the sunny spot in the sidewalk. I didn't want to stay in the shade. And so it's the rays of the sun that feel so good and nourishing to us. But you don't say, you say, oh, I'm going to go stand in the sun, right? But the sun is technically this globe up in the cosmos somewhere, right? That it is separate from the rays, but you can't really separate it. And it's analogy. It's like wave on the ocean kind of thing. We do the best we can with human language to wrap our heads around what this is, but we are like those rays of the sun. The only way that the divine can touch anybody is through us. And it's not just us humans, it's us animals, it's the beauty of nature. Most of us go outside in this part of the world and really just feel so filled up by nature. And people are always saying, nature is my church. Nature is a place where God's fingers are reaching through, these rays are touching us. And so it's a paradox, because at the one time it's infinite, it's everything, it can't be defined. As soon as you define it, you've limited it. But it's also personal, and it expresses in ways that we can get. So when we say, operator, get me Jesus on the line, it's like we want a way to experience that connection.
You know, there's a wonderful concept that's new to me, but in Unity, that differentiates between personality or personalized and individualized or individuation. And I really do believe that it's those moments when we drop personality, what I tend to call ego, we drop this constructed sense of our identity, that we open up for our true expression, which is the individuation. We each we're all connected, we're all one, and yet we are unique expressions of that divine allness. And I think it's in the individuation, when we're more in a Christ consciousness, that those rays are really shining, really reaching out.
Yeah, I think you're right. And it's because we all have our lower self way of being at time, but that's what we're called to. That's when we feel in resonance, when we're behaving that way, when we're letting love flow and express as us. And this is something that it takes practice, because left to our own devices, we wouldn't always, be our most elevated selves, right?
Well, I don't know about you. I mean, I'm pretty much always there now.
That ministry program is better than I realized.
And the humility is just growing as well. In fact, now I forgot what I was going to say. I know what I was going to say. The evolution of our own sense of ourself. I think Angel was an awesome example of that. She caught herself in that place of, I'm separate from, I'm in need, where is it going to come from? And realized, I'm more than that. I'm all of this. And she really stepped into that elevated aspect of herself. And I think in thinking about this talk, you've mentioned it a couple of times, language is so limited for talking about this kind of stuff. It's very difficult to put in language, but I think we know it when we sense it, right? We know we're in Godness. We can sense it.
Yeah.
And
I
for
think
me, nature for sure is it's easier to access there for me.
Yeah, I think that's really an important distinction, the sensing it as opposed to talking about it, which we're doing right now. And because our minds need something, and it's in our minds that we put up the resistance, right? So for example, you talked about your story about Jesus, and maybe you can share that in a minute, but she's got all this resistance up because Jesus is it's the baby in the bathwater that she threw out back from that trauma upbringing that she had around religion. And so if Jesus is trying to come through, Jesus is saying, get me Cylvia on the line. And she's like, no. She's not gonna listen to that. Yeah, you're blocking the call, right? It's like caller ID, and not taking Jesus's call. So I don't know where I was going with that, but tell about that story.
Well, we're doing great up here today, aren't we?
Yeah.
What I will say is something that is really opening up for me is, again, being able to talk to Jesus. Even to say that out loud still feels a little strange to me because of all of the unlearning, as Robin mentioned. That was an awesome prayer, by the way. The unlearning that I've had to do. But I swear, everywhere I've turned this last 4 years, Jesus has been knocking, and I've been not really wanting to go there. I got to working with A Course in Miracles very intensely about 3.5 years ago now, and I struggled with it mightily because it is actually put forward as Jesus speaking, being channeled through this woman and putting this out there, and I just had to kind of sit with that and dial into the truth that I could sense underneath that language. Everywhere I turned, though, the Jesus thing was coming up. And I had just about 6 months ago this crazy experience. Angels were also coming to me. People were mentioning the angel thing, and I had as much baggage around that as I had around the Christian thing, right? It was very hard for me. So I'm sitting in my little hot tub. One of the things I love about A Course in Miracles, it says on our spiritual journey, if we're bumping into a teaching or something that we're having difficulty with, is just to be willing. just to stay willing. So I had this angel message coming here and here, and people mentioned. So I'm sitting in my
This
little
is
hot
like
tub.
Harry Potter and the owls, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I'm sitting in my little hot tub. It's warm. It was a warm day, so my house is very small. My sliding glass door is right there, and it goes right into the little kitchen. And this, I've been doing my morning practices, my meditation and everything, and this angel thing kept coming in. So I finally just said, okay, I'll just be willing. I'm uncomfortable, but I'll just be willing. And in that moment, something caught my eye, and I looked over, and floating down from inside my house, from my ceiling in my kitchen, was a white feather. And I just thought, okay, angels, help me out. I'm for it. And the same thing is really happening now with the concept of Jesus. And I could only get there because of Unity's teaching that it's a way shower, and that it's not the only way shower. But I realized I was blocking this whole body of comfort and help from myself just because of my rebelliousness against the way I had been raised with it earlier.
I think that the whole story of Jesus, and when you read in the Gospels of that, there's so much richness there in terms of learning how to be in the world. And I think because I heard it enough through my growing up, it's something that comes back. I don't really actually spend time reading the Bible unless I happen to be teaching a class in it. But the phrases come back to me. There's set ones that they'll pop into my mind, or a story will just pop into my mind. It's part of the fabric of my soul. And that might not be true for all of you, and I'm not saying it has to be. What I'm really hoping that everybody will walk away from here with is a willingness to, if Jesus might be somebody for you that could help you on your way, to show you a path, to just be willing to let that happen. But it doesn't have to be that for you. I'm not saying everybody needs to take Jesus Christ as their personal Lord and Savior. I am not saying that. I'm just saying, if you have slammed a door the way Cylvia is describing, consider cracking it open. Even if Jesus has never been part of your journey, the Course in Miracles that's so powerful was channeled by, was she Jewish or atheist? Atheist.
She had a really hard time with what was happening to her, I have learned.
But I think, wasn't she raised Jewish and now she was atheist?
She was atheist. I don't know if she was raised Jewish. She was atheist and a psychologist. Dick saying she was? Okay.
Yeah.
It's
so
incredible.
two traditions that have no room for Jesus.
For sure.
And she channels the Course in Miracles.
Yes, which is just an amazing body of work. And so the Course in Miracles is Jesus speaking. And there's a line in there that I love related to this. And before I say that, so I think, yes, being able to open up to, whatever kind of communion with this spirit that is Jesus was a person. I think the other thing that it's really helpful to me is the concept of this as an example, a human being who remembered his divinity. And that's what is very powerful to me right now about the whole Jesus example. And there's a line in Course in Miracles where Jesus is saying, everything that I am, you are too. It's just that I'm nothing else. Meaning he's dropped the ego and the limitation and the pieces of us that keep us in ourself with a small s versus in ourself with a capital S.
You were talking earlier about that pastor's idea of heaven was that you got to watch other people suffer. I had an experience where I was...
Sure he meant well.
Yeah, I was experiencing a past life regression, and in that I was having a recall of something that was truly horrendous that I had done in another life. And I I was in a state of revulsion at that. And somehow I got from that state of revulsion to an understanding of what was the higher intent behind that aspect of myself and the action that was taken. And I realized that it was trying to encompass love. And as soon as I was able to give myself that grace of, that former self, that grace of recognizing that, oh, there was a high intent there, even if it got really twisted in the process, I just dissolved into this state of love. And it was like love was just reverberating everywhere. It's all that there was. So when you say he's nothing else, there was nothing else. And my heaven had always been, up until then, some place that you go afterwards and for eternal peace or whatever. And I was like, for a type A personality, that was not attractive. It's like, but what am I going to do? Come on, we've had time on the cloud, it's okay, let's move on. But in this state of love reverberating, I had the thought, oh, well, I could do this. This feels so good, I didn't ever want it to stop.
Kingdom.
Yeah, it is. It's the expansiveness into love and the remembering that who we are is love. Because that's what the divine is, ultimately. It's love. And that's what we're here to remember. And whatever channels, whoever we need to get on the line to remember the truth of who we are, that's what we need to be about. So let's celebrate that. Love is what is the truth.
Hi, lovely people. So this was my story. I was planning on doing, I still am, doing a talk for the battered women, and I went and got my car serviced, and it came out to spend $670. And so I was like freaking out. I'm like, where am I going to get $670, and I started focusing on the limitations of it. At the same time, there was a company that didn't honor their word. And normally I would take the high road, but I decided I needed to let them know, and it was 13 years that it was just nagging me. So I sent them a letter and I said, in my heart you failed to honor your word. And I just said, God, help me let this go. And I get a call from the company and they wanted to sell me something, and I called them on and I said, no, I'm empowered and I'm not going to do it. And then I said, thank you very much, and I hung up. So 2 weeks later I had to bring my car in again, another $125. And I'm like, oh my God, what is going on? So almost like I had a V8. I'm in limitation focus. So of course I'm going to attract more limitations. So I said to God, I'm done with limiting thinking. You're my source, you're my supply. I even said it to Jane. You're my source and you're my supply. I'm not going to doubt you. You're going to provide. 2 days later I had to bring my car in, $200 more. $995, mind you. And I'm saying to God, you're my source, you're my supply, you'll find a way, I know you will. And I literally said this to the mechanic, I'm not going to buy into limitation, I'm staying in abundance focus, and he smiled. 4 days later, I get a letter from that company. I almost tore up the letter, but something in me said, open the letter up. In there was an apology and $995. God is my source and my supply. Right before I got that check, I said to the universe, I'm still going to do this talk for the battered women. I'm doing it for 2 reasons. One, I had come from an abusive upbringing, and I needed to face that fear of that I'm an empowered woman, that no one and nothing can take me emotionally down the drain. And so because of that, I decided to face the fear and do the talk for these battered women to let them know how empowered they are by connecting to their inner power inside of them and not letting anyone or anything stand in their way. And so if you're interested in helping me out, it's for Saving Grace. You can make some donations, and I have about 4 items left that I'm selling to help me to do this talk since they're not going to pay me. And God is the source of supply, and nothing and no one can take that source away It flows in abundance of love. It flows in abundance of prosperity. It flows in all forms. And I know in my heart that's how I was able to write that article, because I chose to go deeper in abundance, and that channeled message came through my hand. That's 4 minutes and 30 seconds, Jane.